this gigantic airplane were built the world's largest motors, with great 14-foot automatically controlled propellers, a muffled roar of the powerful motors, and gracefully the 42 tons of steel, cargo, crew, and passengers take the air with the ease of a great bird. As fleet as the wind, the great ship's silver hull roars its way overhead and into the infinite blue of the sky. The Clipper treats her passengers to a bird's-eye view of the historic shores of San Francisco Bay and past the Golden Gate with its famous new bridge, leaving behind the mainland of the United States to cross the vast open seas to breakfast in Honolulu, 2,400 miles ahead. Fantastic. In one long weekend, half the world will pass beneath you. Here is travel magic Aladdin never dreamed of, a practical yours-to-command magic. In the same time you would spend on a hurried motor trip to a nearby resort will carry you across the world to the very doorway of the glamorous Orient. The thrill of the takeoff is past, and with the shoreline lost to view, you settle down in comfortable and spacious lounge rooms to read, to write, to play games, to talk, or to nap. There are always things to see. A mighty ocean liner of the Pacific below, bound for Hawaii, our same destination. It's a novel thrill, too, for the passengers on the steamer who wave their greeting to the speedy clipper ship, which rapidly passes them into the distance.
We're here today with Eugene J. Dunning, who worked as a director of training with Pan Am. When did you start working for Pan Am?
I started in August of 15th, 1942. And for a good part of my career, I was based both in San Francisco and Honolulu. And then I moved back to New York and took over the training of all girls from all over the world.
Okay. And tell us about your first flight on the B-314 or the clipper ship.
Well, it was interesting because my mother and brother, one brother, were standing on top of this flat at Geary and Geary Street and 49th and 50.
In San Francisco.
In San Francisco, which was possibly the best place to spot any of the airplanes going back and forth. And I told them that I would be leaving at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and to watch for me. So they were standing in the roof, and pretty soon we came into sight. So, unbeknownst to me, Bob O'Brien, who was the other steward, came up behind me and said, "Here, Gene," he said, "throw this toilet paper out through the dump chute." And I did, and it said, "Furl down." My brother and mother stood waving a towel at me, and I could see them, and it was quite an experience.
Okay, so where's the chute, the opening and you just dropped it, just held onto one end?
It was down at the end. It was just a hole in the airplane.
Okay.
And when we threw it out, it just disappeared. But in this case, the toilet paper unfurled in a long stream.
You flew the Pacific Clipper in October 1942 from New York to San Francisco. Please tell us about the significance of that flight.
Well, we were told that we had to go back to New York and pick up the NCO-2, the Pacific Clipper, because it had been kept on the East Coast for about 4 months flying there, and then we would pick it up and take it back to San Francisco. When we arrived in New York at a PB-2I-3, an Old Navy bomber, a flying boat bomber, we pulled up to the dock, and the guys all looking at us. We had changed our uniforms, and he said, "Where are you guys from?" And I said, "San Francisco." And he turned around and yelled back to the other guy. He said, "Hey, Charlie, these guys are from San Francisco." Not another soul was out to greet us. But we went up to the hangar, and there was the NCO-2 with its inside completely torn out. All the engines were gone. The guy said, "Well, I don't know, but you got to go find a hotel." He said it'd be about three weeks before we finished fixing it. And we did do that. And 3 weeks later, after a long layover in the Lexington Hotel, we went to Miami. We took 72 traffic sales guys down for a meeting in Miami, and then we flew to Corpus Christi, a Navy base, and we took on enough gas to go nonstop from San Francisco, from Corpus Christi to San Francisco. When we landed in San Francisco, that was the first known airplane that flew around the world. Commercial airplane, I should say.
Hence by clipper again across the Atlantic to complete a circumnavigation of the globe. Soaring across the high roads of the sky, back from the other side of the world.
Now, this same plane, the reason it got to New York was when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. This plane was in New Zealand.
That's right.
The Japanese blocked the return route of the Pacific Clipper, so it could not fly from the Pacific directly across to the different islands to get back to San Francisco.
That's right.
So it took almost 30 days and maybe 23,000 miles to fly the reverse route around the world and finally make it to New York.
That's right. Now, Bob Ford, who was a resident in Penn Valley, right out close to here, was the captain on that flight.
War breaks out, World War II, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. The military took over the fleet of the Clippers. Could you share some of those experiences with flying with the military?
Oh, sure. As a matter of fact, we were right in saying the Navy, they took over control of the Clippers for the U.S. government. And so we were literally flying all planes belonging to the Navy. And we went from Honolulu down to Palmyra Island, then to Canton Island, to Wallis Island, to Fiji, to New Caledonia, and resulted in our arrival at the furthest place south, which was New Zealand. And there was some wonderful stories, and those of you who are watching this, who were Pan Am those days, will be sure to think back what a wonderful time it was for us flying the Pacific.
The red glow of the rising sun reflects from the blades of our fast revolving propellers, making a fantastic design. Out of the window, the unparalleled beauty of the sun rises over the infinite expanse of the ocean as we fly high over red-tinted fleecy clouds. Like a magic scene, the early morning sunlight illuminates the rocky coastline of Hawaii, whose unexcelled beauty inspired Robert Louis Stevenson to call them the loveliest fleet of islands that lie anchored in any ocean. Our motors take on a different tune, and we thrill to the realization that our great flying clipper ship is settling easily upon the calm tropical waters of Hawaii overnight from America. Excitedly stepping ashore to spend a day or weeks in this lovely land, we feel the aloha of the flowered leis as the sweet music of the islands greets us.
Now, it took, these planes were relatively slow when they flew. And it took 23 hours to fly from San Francisco to Honolulu?
Yes, 23 hours was a long flight. Mostly they averaged around 20, 21, but they were slow. Let's face it. Not like today with the jets.
All right. And wasn't there one time where it took 3 tries to get?
Oh, yes. We had a flight to go from San Francisco to Honolulu, and we got halfway there, and our navigator checked the time of our flying, and he went up to the captain and said, "We can't make it, fella, we got to go back." So we turned around and went back. The next day we went out, the same thing, and the third time we just barely made it. ETP3 said, "Go ahead."
So if I understand this right, it's 21, 22, 23 hours one way, nonstop, obviously.
That's right.
And halfway, the navigator says, we're either going to make it or we aren't, because how much of a headwind,
That's right.
or we don't have enough tailwind. And at that point, he makes a decision, tells the pilot, and then they will turn around and head back to where they started out from, whether it could be Honolulu, could be San Francisco. In other words, you go halfway, you go, can't make it, turn around, fly back,
That's right.
and try again the next day.
That's right.
So, and one time it took 3 tries
That's
to get to Honolulu. That's amazing. I remember you telling me about the navigator determined this, and there really wasn't quite enough fuel left. And that was coming into San Francisco?
Into San Francisco. And I was aboard this flight, and the captain told us that it was very close to being out of fuel, and he decided to make its landing in the lagoon between Treasure Island and Yerboin Island. And as he landed, number 4 kicked out. It just stopped. And
Number 4 engine ran out of gas.
Engine.
Okay.
And he turned the plane around, started taxiing back to the dock, and without knowing, well, he knew, but the number 3 engine finally caught out. And so we didn't know how much gas was left for the other 2 engines, but we didn't really care. We were on the water.
That was cutting it close.
Oh, very close.
What was it like for the passengers in the clipper ships?
Well,
I heard they were pretty luxurious.
they were. There was one whole lounge area with 3 tables, and for the people that were flying, we would announce dinner, and we would set up all the 3 tables for 12 people. If we had more than 12 people, there were those who preferred to wait, and so it was a beautiful, exacting type of airplane, because it was long enough. You had to go up 2 and 3 levels to reach the aft end of the aircraft, where the honeymoon suite was, and it had twin beds. Don't ask me why twin beds, but it was right forward of the main laboratory for women, and it was a gorgeous. It's the B314.
B314, yeah. So it had chefs, it had linen table service, china. It had sleeping berths for how many?
For about 36.
Okay. And it would hold, I think, 74 passengers?
That's right.
So would they sleep in shifts?
No, they had the, well, between San Francisco and Honolulu, the flight time was so large, we had to contain the number of passengers, and rarely I remember one time there were about 13 passengers. That was the maximum that we could have taken because of the winds and the flight time.
Oh, okay. So it never flew at capacity until the military was on board? Or?
No, and the clipper ships never went past Honolulu during the war.
During the war.
There were only PB-2x3s and PBNs.
Okay, I
which
understand.
Navy planes.
Tell us about the training programs that you implemented for the stewards and stewardesses.
Well, they're all stewards. Remember this. On the flying boats, they could only have stewards.
Oh, okay.
But remember, we went into the land planes, the DC-4s, and the Constellations, the Lockheed Constellations, and then back to the Douglas DC-6, the DC-7, DC-7-3, and the Boeing Stratocruiser, 377. But when the girls came out from Honolulu, from Miami, and from Brownsville, I trained them, and we had a small room, and it was then that I got the idea we should have a mock-up. So I took the hallway that they went from the front office to the kitchen, and they made it into a mock-up, and that was the first mock-up I ever thought of.
Amazing.
And actually, when we finally opened up our big training school in Miami, I had them build a real mock-up for 707 with a blind side that was open and the one side was the same as the aircraft.
And you also trained, after World War II, you trained the Japanese and Chinese stewardesses for the Pacific flights.
Yes, just as Japanese stewardesses to start with. There were about 17 or 18 girls when I finally was asked to transfer back to New York. But that was a marvelous experience for the girls. Frankly, I think that was the finest group of girls I've ever been associated with. They knew their presence, their treatment of the passenger, their inability to get mad. It was just a great group.
Now, the domestic airlines had stewards, stewardesses, but they were almost all entirely trained as nurses?
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Yes. The domestic aircraft had stewardesses, I would guess, about 1970 or thereabouts, and they began recruiting regular girls for stewardesses.
And Pan Am really was in the forefront because the women that they chose had poise, had beauty, and intelligence. I mean,
That's
just
right.
Everything you'd want in a personality.
These girls were unbelievable, really, truly.
Yeah, I saw a picture of you with them surrounding you.
Oh.
And sitting on your lap. That looked pretty good.
I was always willing to take my picture with them.
Oh yeah, I bet. And how long was the training period initially for the?
Initially, when I went back to New York to take over training, the people in management had designated 7 weeks to train. And what I did, I said, that's too long. We'll train for 4 weeks. And 1 week we'll send the girls out on the line. And as stewardesses trainees, which was present on their wings, it said trainee. they would go up from Miami to London to Paris to San Francisco to Honolulu down to South America from 1 week of flying, and then they'd be back for the that's 6 weeks of training. And it was, to me, it was very, very, very complimentary.
Were a lot of the stewardesses and stewards bilingual?
Oh, they're almost all of them had to be.
Right.
They had to be. And there was a group from Spain. There was a group from Germany. Some of the girls came from Paris. Some came from up in Denmark, Copenhagen, U.S., Honolulu with the Japanese girls. We had marvelous lingual girls, every one of them.
Now, you were a supervisor on the historic flight of Premier Yoshida when he flew from Tokyo to San Francisco in 1951
That's
to
right.
sign the peace treaty.
That's right.
If you could share that experience with us.
Well, I was telling you the story today. We were in Tokyo. The plane had arrived from San Francisco. And incidentally, only the Japanese people, Japanese gentlemen who were in the Diet, which is the same as our Congress, they were the only ones on this airplane. And when I went downstairs, a chap was sitting in the seat smoking a cigarette, and I knew that they were fueling the aircraft. And I yelled at him. I said, "Sir, put it out." And he put it out, and I said, "Be aware there's fuel that's being pumped into the aircraft now." I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "My name is Chris Dunning." And I said, "Chris Dunning?" I said, "I'm Gene Dunning. It's a wonder that you're smoking down in the lounge." So that flight was one of many, many flights we've had that we went Tokyo to Honolulu direct. We sent a fellow out by the name of Sid Sarabrini. He tracked the jet stream, which is now commonly used and commonly referred to as a jet stream, into the West Coast from Honolulu. This was as far as Honolulu, and the next port of call was San Francisco, where Yoshida signed the Japanese peace treaty.
We have this is a Japanese rifle?
A Japanese rifle. From the Japanese-Russia War, which was in the 18th century, I think. And a trip I had at Sugi, we flew from San Francisco to Honolulu to Wake Island, and then Wake Island out to Tokyo. In Tokyo, we flew down to Tsugi, which is just south of Tokyo. And this gun, I'm ready to send to my son, Rick, who treasured it as much as I have, because this gun was owned by somebody in the Japanese population. And the word went out when MacArthur took over the administration of Japanese people. He sent up an order that any firearms were to be turned into the Tokyo arsenal. And we went out there one day to take a look at the arsenal, and I saw this on top of 20, 30, 40 guns, the old guns, not the new ones. The ones that the Japanese used in the U.S. war were stacked all over the place. But this was 100 years old then.
At least, yeah.
At least.
Amazing. It's got an octagon barrel.
Yes, and it should have, it was supposed to rest on a tripod. It's a wonderful, wonderful keepsake for me.
Oh, yeah.
To look at that and think 100, 200 years ago, somebody out using it in the Japanese-Russia War was unbelievable.
Now, the navigation system on those early planes, used a radio beacon, and they would home in on the strength of the beacon, and when that worked,
That's right.
that was how they navigated. If that didn't work, which I think happened sometimes, they had to use a sextant and use celestial navigation.
And they used celestial navigation almost every flight.
Oh, really?
Yes, almost all the flights. They would track the position of the aircraft upon a map, and they would put a start fix down on the chart, keeping close to the main chart until he got into Honolulu or San Francisco, to whichever way he's going.
So, okay, so they used that across the ocean, and then as they got in closer to the mainland or one of the islands, that's where they could pick up the beacon?
That's right.
Okay. Now, radio communications, they use Morse code.
Morse code.
And when did they actually go to voice radio? Do you remember that?
About 1951, I think. It was close to that time. When we took the B-377, the Boeing Stratocruiser, they could use voice. But until then, it was all Morse code.
Amazing. And they used International Morse code?
International Morse code.
During the war, it had to be encoded when they were transmitting, so that added a whole nother layer.
Well, until then, it was regular Morse code. But then when we went to war, on that flight of Bob Ford's, they had to cut out all of their sending because the Japanese could pick up the airplane.
Right. All of the original planes that were owned by Pan Am, the clipper ships, when the war ended, the Navy kept those?
Yes, they did. And incidentally, I have a picture that's shown on this program that I was on the last flight of the flying boats to San Francisco from Honolulu. And as I understand, the Navy, which had taken over all planes, was ready to give them back to Pan Am. But unfortunately for them, Juan Tripp, who was the president of our airline, said, "I'm sorry, I don't care to have them back."
They're all worn out by then.
And that was the end of the flying boats and my beginning to work on the constellations.
Okay, yeah, because by then they had much newer ships.
Sure.
Much faster, more efficient.
A DC-4 at 13 hours. That was unbelievable. You could go from San Francisco to Honolulu 13 hours?
13 hours.
Impossible. I went into Honolulu last year for just a stay, and I think our flight time was something like 5 hours and 20 minutes, and with wind blowing against us. So we've come a long ways.
Leave the train on the track, take the boss off your back. Leave the gang in a bind, out of sight, out of mind. Get away, right away, like today. For once in a
going grand.